today. I hope you're all well and keeping safe. And very excited to be talking to Sri Jayakumar sir, our guest and orator in this session. He's an environmental activist, director, Pesticide Action Network India, executive director, Tunnel, a trust promoting environmental awareness in our society, sustainable agriculture, and waste management, etc. I hope I'm audible, right? Okay. He's also a member of State Tourism Advisory Board of Kerala, steering committee member of International Peace Elimination Network. Uh, Welcome, sir. We're really glad to have you on. I know the introduction I've given is very short and concise. For the benefit of other attendees in the session, I request you to give us a small introduction about yourself and Tunnel, the organization as well, which we are collaborating with today. So
Thank you,
over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sharath. Thank you very much, and I'm so happy to be with all of you, and especially in the event organized by Decathlon. We are quite happy that we are able to partner with someone who is on the right direction in the field which we are talking about waste. So about Tunnel, Tunnel is a I do have a cap of two organizations. One is Pesticide Action Network, which is founded in 1983, an international organization working specifically on pesticides and agriculture issues, and mostly looking from a people's point of view and a planet point of view. So what is required for protecting planet and what is required for protecting people's rights. So these are the two major focus of Pesticide Action Network, and it is a global organization. We have regional offices in Africa, Asia, Latin America, North America, Europe, and Asia and the Pacific. And I'm more working very closely with Asia and Pacific in its Asia and Pacific board, and also happen to be the founder director of Pesticide Action Network India. The second is actually the first one, which is Tunnel, which is founded in 1986 by many of us who were just out of the college, and we want to do something for environment. And we were part of the oldest environmental organization in Kerala, the Society for Environment Education Kerala, based in Payyanur. So we were a couple of us who really want to do a bit of research and more of a science-based work. So we came towards something, and our friend and mentor guide, Dr. Shanti from Trivandrum, she put the name Tunnel, and thus Tunnel was born. And since 1996 or 98, it was not very much active as an organization. It was more of a group of friends coming together. And since 98, we have been looking at many issues. And fortunately, there are 3 or 4 major focuses of Tunnel as on today. One is what we started in 1998 on pesticides, and it is mostly with agriculture and pesticides, and mostly what we talk agroecology, which is the new word for sustainable agriculture. So that is one piece of work. Second piece is on waste, and we generally talk it as zero waste. So our approach is not to create waste to manage, but try to not to create waste to manage, so that your systems need to look at things and rectify the system, or you create some systems which do not really generate the waste. So that is the key focus for us. Third area of work focus is climate change. We are doing a lot more work on climate action, climate change as a system, and we are looking at net zero, carbon neutral, and variety of policy interventions towards that. And we do, like Tunnel is a grid neutral organization, so we don't take electricity from the grid for running the organization, which has reasonably good staff, and we are using many computers, but fortunately we are today grid neutral. And we also have a fourth area, which is mostly on ecosystems and biodiversity conservation, and we do have a fairly comprehensive work happening on biodiversity conservation with a little bit focus on agrobiodiversity. And it is about 5 trustees who run the organization in its policy work, and we have around 6 or 7 permanent employees, and maybe around 30-40 research fellows, interns, or project staff who are part of the collective work. Thank you, Sharad.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I know we can ask and learn from you about endless verticals related to environment, nature, its preservation, etc., and etc. But we'll try to stick on by
Sure.
focusing on the topic of waste management as the context and the day topic demands.
Yeah.
So, before we begin, I have a small reminder to the fellow attendees. Try to turn off your microphones while the orator is speaking. So, if you have any questions to ask, kindly save them to the end of the session, where we'll be having a 15 minutes open Q&A, or else you can just post it on the chat session on your right side, which will be answered in the final minutes. So, yeah, that's it. Sir, I will start with a very basic question, but I think it's very essential. It very essential that to understand and to understand the know-how and why. And I also believe this will create a strong foundation for the coming questions on the queue. So I'll start with asking you, what are the benefits of maximizing waste diversion and diversion, and
Okay.
why are landfills environmentally harmful?
See, Sharath, basically, if you look at many things, like if you look back 50, 60 years, most of the materials we create could be in a way either biodegradable or reusable, or it can be repurposed.
Right.
But of late, we have been using so many stuff which is not, in a sense, what can be either disposed of by biodigester by converting into a compost or a biogas or something, or not something which can be repurposed. But like your metal, you can recycle it if you have some of the materials which can very easily recycled into back to it. But maybe in the current scenario, we use, or if you look at most of the waste which we create is in a way broadly linked with disposable culture, which is linked with plastics. So if you look at the reason for landfills, if you take a typical house in a Western, mostly the idea of, see, if you look at waste management and the ideas of recycling, reuse, or even recovering from discards was there in the developed world right from late 70s and early 80s, because their problem with managing with these disposables was so grave then. Fortunately for India, we were ahead of them. We were not behind them, we were ahead of them. So we had this problem of managing our discards little late in the 90s, and then our government of India and the Honorable Supreme Court of India, they all had a public litigation case by Almitra Patel, then followed by a committee. Finally, we got our waste management laws only in 2000. So if you look at the Western society, mostly they had two options. One, they used to burn everything. That is what you call the incineration. And incineration is one of the dirtiest technology of burning resources on one side, and also creating toxics on the second side. So like you have a 1 ton of a waste which we can put into this burning machine, and you can create maybe 10 kilos of toxic substance which need a care which you normally give to a radioactive substance. So that harmful kind of a toxic substance. So many countries, especially the Western US and European countries, they went for what you call landfills. And unlike Kerala or our popular cities, in US or in European systems, there is a large land area available. So it is basically burying the materials which we cannot use. So that is how the landfills came in. But the most important thing we have to remember in both any technology on waste management, it cost. So as a city corporation or a company, when you try to send materials to the landfill, you need to pay for per tonnage. So that per tonnage cost is something which is huge. And second, many times you are sending very important resources to a landfill, so that you are actually dumping a resource which is a criminal offense, because you need to either dig in the mining, or you have a process of creating materials, and say you use a huge quantity of electricity to produce aluminum. So then if you dump your aluminum into a landfill, it becomes a serious offense to humanity. So, so I will say that there are three aspects. One, payment you have to make for the disposal. Second, the cost you have invested in creating this raw material which can be recycled or which can be repurposed or reused. And third, there is this issue of toxic legacy, like the landfills leak in very sophisticated countries with reasonably good environment legislation like Europe or US, most of the OECD countries, there is a serious issues of landfill leaking, and then they have to create more containment, and it becomes Superfund sites and other things. So I hope that I clarified your question to some extent.
Yes, completely, sir. Thank you. So, sir, next question. I need a general answer for the question.
Yeah.
How important do you think it is for people of an ecosystem, to come together, to bring about, to come together to make a greater change so something that is really rewarding and something that is really good. How this small efforts by us.
Sharath, it is a very good question, and I think it is a need of the time. Way back in 80s, anything you do individually were something very noble. But in 2020, when we talk about something, you need a matter of scale. So it is important. I'm not saying that it is less important of the individual doing it, but it is much more important for the individual to get maybe another 1,000 people who do the same thing. So that is a need of the planet. So that is first. And second, on a very general sense, if you do something on an individual basis, that is going to cost you much.
Right.
So if you are a collective of 30 houses, see one small composting unit somewhere or a garage to store all your recycles, and then you call somebody to come and pick it, it becomes very economic for him to come and pick it because he get a bulk of things. It is not, he don't need to travel to all the houses to collect things. So I can tell you a very good example of Trivandrum where there was one, I forgot the full name, but Nair, who was part of a residents association, and they all around 140 houses, they came together. This was much before we had this Waste Management Act and rules. So what he did was he offered a young chap a total freedom. He said, all the waste in this 140 houses that can be recycled or that is not biodegradable will be composted, will be brought to this garage and kept there, which can be taken by anyone. Which can be taken by this person who will come and collect it free. And he segregates and he sells the paper, he sells the cardboard. And he later, Mr. Nair realized that the fellow makes about 10,000 rupees by selling recyclables. And he has a small bunch of some plastics which cannot be disposed, and that is kept in the garage itself. And he also created compost facilities within the residential area so that there was not a single waste which was sent out by the residents association. So that is possible when you do it collectively. If you do it as one house, it is not possible. And it is also very recently in our good friend, the MLA in Trivandrum, V.K. Prashant, organized an exchange. He called it flea market. So anybody could come in with, like you have two old chairs which you don't want to use, you have 10 plates which is not used, you have 20 glasses which you don't want to use, or you have an old TV which you don't want to use, a little damaged bed which you want to dispose. So that if it is working, that was brought to a common space, and anyone could go there and tag it so that he can take it free for his home. So in a sense, you have this recycling of materials. So there is a lot of individual savings, like I don't need to spend money to dispose my good, and there is a friend who comes and pick it free and he uses it for another 10 years or so, that there is again saving of resources in the longer. So I think all this is possible when people come together as friends or communities and work together. I think that is the key for today. I mean, I personally, I believe the time of individual actions are gone, because it is a race. It is a race to save the planet, and that will happen with a matter of scale. And the scale is something like, as a young person, I was very proud when I planted around 200 trees in a year. But today in Kerala, if you look at that, every year Kerala plants about 5 to 6 crores of trees. And that is something you need now. You don't need, you can't stop at 200. You need to make it 6 crores, if I put it that way.
Thank you, sir. So I'm running straight towards our topic here.
Yeah,
So this is a chain of question. So
please.
the first one is, how do I practice waste management at my home?
Yeah,
That is the first question. And
okay,
how do I dispose of my e-waste, which
okay.
is also very important these days?
Uh,
So
Can,
the next question is, can I
yeah,
dispose of my household generated medical waste with my household garbage?
okay.
You can answer one by one. So the
Yeah,
first question was, how do I practice waste management at my home?
yeah. I think if you look at Sharath, it is a very simple English thing. Like waste is a verb, it is not a noun. So meaning if something is waste in your house, it is because of an action. So you can always find what is that action and try to find out what is becoming what in a correct English word, it is discards. Like it is of no use to you. You can't call it a waste. It is a no use to you. So then you try to see if something is of no use to you, then you call it as a discard. But there is also pieces which can be truly called a waste, like you have your kitchen discards, which are in a sense waste until it is managed in some ways. So if the way for practicing is if we can create a kind of a checklist of what is discards in in my house, what is something which can be used by somebody else who is required. So in a very clear sense, a waste is something which is of no use to me. It could be of use to somebody. So that if you can do this, then you save a lot of waste from going to waste, and then you see what can be used as as is only a discard, and then that can be either like newspapers or other things. You can give it to somebody or you can manage it some ways. But again, there is something you end up with a few things which are waste and which you need to dispose either at home with a small facility, or you can do it in a collective community facilities outside your space, or in in most of the cities now there are so many facilities which can be used, like there may be a community curbside compost plant, or there may be a material recycle facility. We have a lot in Trivandrum. We have compost facilities, so that you don't need to compost anything at home. You can take your bucket of wet waste to the compost on the curbside, on the wayside, and you can just hand it over there. You don't need to pay anything, and the city corporation takes care of it. You have a dry leaf, you can just put it into the dry leaf collection bin of city corporation. It will be taken care without any payment. So that way you can try to create. The same thing is applicable in Bangalore, in Chennai, most of the places it is there. But if you live in a very and you're also very busy, then probably you need to use the service of somebody who is providing that service of removing the discards from your house on a smaller fee. And some places like newspapers and other things, somebody will come and pay you and take it. But a majority of things, they will ask you to pay a little bit to pay it. In Trivandrum, we have we call green community, which is all the corporations and municipalities and panchayats in Kerala have green support, green army, or some kind of a green enterprise approved by the local self-government, which will take it. So that will be the second option. In terms of your second question on e-waste, I think that is something which cannot be very easily handled, because
Right.
e-waste, I mean, there are two problems. One, we have many e-waste uh, handling facilities even in Kerala, like in Ernakulam, there is one in Perumbavoor, there is one in Palakkad, there is one in close to Trivandrum, there is 2 or 3 things, two institutions. And there are also some of the rag picker or waste pickers who will come and take it from your house if you keep it separate. Like in Trivandrum, if you keep your electronic waste separate, there are people who will come and pick it, and even things like transformers, old phones, or things that they will even willing to pay a small amount and take it. But things like fused CFL lamps or tube lights, those things will not be taken free. So that need to be those are the kind of a problem things which is bit difficult to manage, like the CFL lamps and tube lights. But all other stuff, including computers, mobile phones, basically e-waste is defined as any material which needs a plug. So a material which needs a plug, ideally we should have what we call an EPR policy, an extended producer responsibility. India do not have it. So that is why we can't give it back to the seller. But if you're in other countries like most of the other countries, including some Korea, Japan, or Singapore and other countries, you can give it back to the seller, and seller will take it free of cost.
Yeah, I think a few of the smartphone manufacturers have started something like that in the recent time.
There is a good thing of some of these global brands is that it is very difficult for them to practice something in Europe and something different in India, because that cost. So they have this uniform practice of putting it everywhere. So that is the other option. And in places like, unfortunately, all the local self-government in Kerala do not have it, and most of the local self-governments in the country also do not have it. But you can always put pressure, and like in Trivandrum, there is a collection day for e-waste, and the corporation collects all the e-waste. Then it is given to Clean Kerala company, and all the panchayats in Kerala have a contract with Clean Kerala company, which is a government of Kerala-owned company, and they will collect all the e-waste and pass it over to the responsible recycler or a person who will destroy it or dispose it off, so that you don't have a problem of e-waste. Third to your question is actually the bit difficult. Technically speaking, home level management of medical waste is a problem. Medical waste is by definition, you can't really manage it at home. You need some kind of a system, and probably because some of the flats in Kerala, they try to create this rooftop incinerators or burning machines. They burn it, but again, legally it is not the right thing to do, because if you look at the pollution control board standards, you need a 30-meter stack height for something which is of the nature of medical waste to be burned, and it has to be a certified facility by the pollution control board. And there are only 2 or 3 facilities in Kerala which are certified and approved by the state pollution control board. And fortunately or unfortunately, there is this situation in Kerala, and we have Image, which is a program by IMA, which is collecting biomedical waste from all the hospitals, so or the labs. And if you have a patient at home which need to be disposed, then you need to go into that path. Having said that, I will also say a kind of a qualifier, and that qualifier is if you are a very responsible person, you know how to manage it. Like for example, a used mask. If you keep the used mask for 3 days on a cover without touching it, most possibly if it is infected by some means, there is a possibility that that infection will go, that infectant, the pathogen will be dead in 3 days. So if you can do those kind of facilities, then you can or even
for any kind of mask, not for any kind of mask.
Any kind of mask, it is if you keep it without touching it for three days in a cover, so pathogen must be dead. But if it is a wet mask, then that is a different issue. I'm talking about dry mask. So the other thing is also any of these things you need to disinfect by using sodium hypochlorite or hydrogen the peroxide or some of the approved disinfectant as per the government directive. And if once you disinfect, you can dry store it at home and pack it separately and dispose it if you adopt the practice of disinfecting. At the same time, the cloth mask and other things, you don't need to really worry about sending it to any facility. And if you're not staying in a flat, and if you have facilities, once you disinfect, I underline the fact, if you disinfect with sodium hypochlorite and keep it for seasoning for 2 or 3 days so that the pathogen is dead, then if you bury it in something like a 10-12 feet deep pit, it will be still safe to do that. A 10 feet deep is a bit serious one. You have to dig about 3 meters. So if you do that, it is still safe to do it.
Right. Thank you. And adding on to that question, what are the common recyclable materials that I can recycle from my household garbage? Is it possible in a household perspective?
Yeah, thank you. I think there the first thing which is recyclable and which is not recycled in that sense is bottles.
Right.
Now, if you look at in my childhood, many of the things like Horlicks or Boost all comes in glass bottles. Now most of them comes in plastic bottles. Yes. But still, our families love to use it as a container, so that that is a form of recycling. So, but again, we need to look at how bad systems create more waste. So many families, they have a broken lid, and it is not easy to get a broken lid for a Horlicks bottle or something. Then it ends up as a waste. So that kind of recycling is there is something external to the families which creates the problem of reusing it or recycling it in that way. But I have a friend who uses the bottles for some time. Then when the bottle, the lid breaks, he converts it into a small, very carefully, because glass bottles, when you plant any saplings or any flowering plants, you need to carefully water, because there is no hole in the bottom. So it can clog and it can create problem for the plants. So he uses it for a variety of purposes. So that is, or one of my favorite idea, which Tanal is right now trying to work it this year, is to create what you call a bottle bank. So I have a lot of bottles which I can take to a common place and deposit as bottles. Like I have 20 jam bottles, I can put it there and I say, I need 2 Horlicks bottles back, which I want to use it. So some kind of a bartering can be done on that. And also, like if you look at the biggest problem in Kerala is about the liquor bottles, because people just throw it here and there. And they're also like most of the glass bottles, you have a variety of recyclable options. Like if you have a very simple glass cutter, it can become juice glasses. Or as you said earlier, that is why I really liked your idea of people working together. So if you have a small community together, then you can cut these glasses into half, and then you get a big juice glass which can be used. So so there is a variety of opportunity for glass, and whatever you get as, like when you in a flat or in a bigger space of say you get 300-400 people bringing all the glass things, then you can send it back to the recycler who picks it for recycling glass back to glass. The same thing with plastics. There is a bit of a problem, because even though we say plastic is recyclable, all the plastics are not recyclable. In true sense, PET, which is this transparent bottle kind of a stuff, is highly recyclable. But I said highly recyclable. We don't have many recycling facilities. So you need to send it back to the recycler. Fortunately, right now in Kerala, most of the cities collect this waste and send it back to institutions who do the segregations. And like I know a organization in Nagarkovil known Saroja Panaya Foundation. They take plastic waste from cities and panchayats and municipalities, and he segregates around 179 different. Like if you take a PET bottle, there is a PET, the transparent one. There is a cap which is HDP. Then there is a label which is a different material, and inside the cap there is another material. So when you take a PET bottle, you get 4 different materials. So the material stream need to be identified so that it gets recycled. So that is one way of doing it, and that can't be done at home. So that is one thing.
Yes,
all the paper can be done, plastic all the cardboard can be done. And also one which I think, Sharath, what is lacking in our communities and in Kerala is that more entrepreneurs coming out of managing this. Like I met a young group in Paris. They were actually going to house and collecting all the cardboards. And what they do is then they rent out cardboards when people shift. So that has become cheaper, because you have to buy a new cardboard box that costs you 10 euros, and when you rent something out for 1 week, it costs you
less. Yes.
So there is several interesting enterprises or jobs which can be created in managing discards, because there is a bit of a limitation of managing smaller quantities at just homes. So that is why you need to come together to manage.
Right. Thank you, sir. So as a part of this World Cleanup Day, Decathlon is also collecting PET bottles and PET bottles.
Okay.
So every stores in Kerala and around India is also collecting this. So I was
Yeah.
just adding on to your answer. So I know since 1983 you're advocating or promoting the preservation of nature as a full-time activist in the environment and in wildlife sector and many other related areas. So from your experience of this huge 30 years in the space of uh, waste management, can you take us through the changes you have observed, like in the mindset of people and in the community as a whole today when comparing it to back in 1983? So how the young people are reacting, how the generation is reacting to this when you are giving a speech or when you are advocating that that this problem as something that need to be taken care of, something that is really uh, in the zone, or
Yeah.
something that is real. So how they are reacting, how do you think it differs from the people from the 80s or late 90s or early 90s?
Yeah, I thank you very much. I think, Sharath, one major observation which I have is that on one sense, our the youth today is much more aware about many things. Like they know that, say, for example, climate change is a reality, and what we were talking about climate change will happen in 2100 may happen in 2030. So they are going to see that in their lives, and they want to make the change. And that is why you have this very radical response from Greta Thunberg on Friday's strikes on similar things which is happening. I mean, like you have I have seen around more than a dozen young people in India who have taken various issues and gone to streets, gone to talk to people and organize and made a change. They could achieve, they could change the government policies, they could do a lot of things. So if you ask me, I see a huge shift in the attitude towards environment and a concern for environment and a readiness to go out and try to solve the issues. And I think if you ask me in terms of work, the only thing which drives me forward is the belief in the young people, because the way they are coming together, you need a community to solve issues, and I see a lot more communities happening in young people, and without anything like there is no religion, there is no politics. They come together because there is an issue, and I think that kind of a coming together is what is happening in among the youth especially. I think I'm very greatly hope. I mean, like I had a small school girl in the 10th standard. I spoke to her about 2 years back, and about a week back, she called me and said they're starting a zero plastic shop in Cochin, and she was inviting me to join them. So, which means the kids are able to bring changes, and so that changes is something which I see a lot more. I'm not saying that 1980s was so bad, but the problem was in 1980s we had many more things to hope. And today we realize that without environment and the planet is in a crisis, and there is a lot more scientific evidence, a lot more literature on the information plank, and I think there is also a lot more like. I'll spin it the other way around, Sharath. You look at if Decathlon was in 1983, how many people will come? Very few.
Yes.
But today you have this large youth assembling there, talking to you, playing there. So that is this community building which you are unknowingly you are doing it. Like you are giving a space for people to come together, and I think
Right.
that coming together is the great opportunity. And I'm so happy that. Even in like sports or physical activities or even cycling, which one of your major activities which you promote. And I think
Yes.
those are things which we need to do. And I'm only saying that it need to be on the scale, like a lakh students cycling in Kerala will make a big change. So I think those things I see in like even in Trivandrum, there is a large, I mean, even young students I see taking cycles and going to schools. Even in COVID, they go out and do things. So
Yes.
that is a big hope for me.
Right. Yes. So as you said, we as a company is also promoting sustainability, and our motto itself is to make sports accessible to many people
Yeah.
sustainably. So with that, I'll go to the next question. So how do you propose diverse ecosystems like corporate, apartments, schools, etc., can establish and engage community-driven actions for waste management? So maybe you can you share an example in the
Yeah.
in your previous answer,
Yeah.
but can you be a bit more precise, and can you just explain it with an example, another example if possible, in a
Sure.
corporate structure maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the interventions, for example, like in many times it is a question of some of the ideas. No, we had for a long time. If you look at right from the first planning 5 years in India to this is 11th or 12th planning year in terms of 5-year planning which we had in India, and we were promoting what you call biogas,
Right.
and it was what they at that time they were calling it gobar gas, because basically it is from it is seen as a cow dung management kind of a facility. And if you look at there is a young entrepreneur who started a small company in Bangalore, who could create a very radical change in the way biogas was managed. Like he could create a cleaning system so that there is a chemical process of filtering toxic gases from biogas, and then the methane is concentrated, and then it can be stored in a container like our liquid natural gas. And then he actually tied up with the housing, the what you call the flats and how residential gated communities, and also even I think one of the largest noon meal provider of Bangalore, and created a lot more waste. And then he was managing tons of waste on biogas, and then he was also feeding this gas on rubber tubes and on chambers for the people to cook, like this mid-noon scheme was
Meals.
benefiting from the mid-noon meal scheme was benefiting from saving the valuable cost for fuel, because they just get it free from the
Discards.
the managing
Waste.
discards. So in a sense, what the corporate houses gives is a cutting edge technology can be given by either, I mean, it can be a small entrepreneur like I have we were kind of incubating a startup from Trivandrum, the Barton Hill Engineering College, the MTech Translational Studies student group. They came here, about 5 of them, and they were working with the idea. And the 3 boys, they worked together in creating a what you call a segregated waste hub, so that it has a earlier it was without any lock, but the new models is like you can go to the hub and you have a plastic bag, you can press on that, and there is a small interface, screen interface, where you have to just tag in your mobile number, then you add what all you have, like you have a chappal which need to be disposed, or a leather belt which need to be disposed. So you add on your details, and those chambers will only open. So then you can put it there. So initially, the Trivandrum had a dry waste segregator, but it was not very professionally made. So so they made this, and in fact, the technology part, like the automation, those part was not there in everything. But then immediately all the segregator hubs, which is made in Trivandrum, became that model. So even though the startup didn't directly financially benefit, it could help in solving the design problem in a dry waste collection hub. So I see that will be one clear example. And many times I think see the corporate houses, like there are many socially responsible, like CSR funds and other things, which create that small kind of thing which can trigger something, like they set up a biogas plant, or they set up a collection facility, or they set up a solar facility.
Panels, yeah.
So, there are a variety of things, and I think I only hope more and more investments going into cycles, more and more investments going in supporting this. As I was telling you, say 10 young people coming together, and if somebody is willing to give them 50,000 rupees, they can run a small enterprise of managing discards, the dry discards which have value. That is happening in many places, and also even small things like a friend of mine who was a banker. He worked with the street children in Chennai, the famous Marina Beach. And in a sense, the police was very much worried about them because some of them were training into pickpocketing. So he introduced this new idea of solar charged lanterns. So they convinced all the peanut sellers and all the street vendors that instead of using your kerosene lamps, you can use a solar lantern, which is charged by this group, around 15 of them. Some were trained by them in repairing the solar also. So they gave around 75 lanterns, and per day for 1 day, the rent is 5 rupees. And if they are pouring kerosene, they have to spend about 30 rupees. So at the end of the first year, they had a profit of around 30,000 rupees. And they cleaned up the peanut sales because there is no more fumes. It is clean LED lights lighting it. So there are several such cases where you see when a problem is addressed by here a banker bringing the technology, bringing and working with people, and also a priest who helped them to work together, and a social counselor who counseled them to take up the profession. So in a very short span, they became from street boys, they became entrepreneurs. So they were solving problems all the people. So I think that is probably the way right now we have to look at future.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. So I think with that question, we can slowly move on to the Q&A session. We are at 2 minutes late to start. So anybody from the session, maybe you can ask your questions, your doubts, and anything which can be related to waste management and things. So anybody want?
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Sure.
I'm Manju.
Yes, yes.
I'm Manju. Hello, sir.
Hello.
I'm Manju. I'd like to ask you. I feel that reducing the generated waste is most important than actually managing the waste. So, do you think we can do something? We can add something in the curriculum so that the coming generation comes up as responsible citizen. Do you think that in other foreign countries we see people are more responsible about how they deal with waste, and here I don't see that much. So do you have any suggestion about that?
Yeah, true. I think I totally agree with you in this idea. I'm only talking about discards after it is properly managed. You can or we can create more waste by responsible behavior, and then trying to manage that with a technological fix or a creative idea is a very, very bad idea. You need to not to create waste, and then but still in our lives we will end up with a lot more discards in our lives. So we need to make sure that our discards can be of use, a useful product for somebody, and at the end of it, it can't be. One of my guru, he always says that if it cannot be recycled, if it cannot be reused, then it should not be made, because it is a burden on you. You can't do anything. So I think we don't have that luxury, so we get a lot of things made. So that is why we are talking about managing. But I totally agree with Manju that we should try to bring it less and less so that we manage it. And yes, see, one problem is not just about curriculum, Manju. Like the way we teach is very obsolete. I think if you ask me anything, the curriculum and the way we teach and training and what you call capacity building of teachers, all these are very bad in our country, and we we need to be very sure about that. One classical 2 examples I can tell you: in New Zealand, in grade 4, they learn about segregation. By the time they reach grade 7, it is the responsibility of the grade 7 students to manage the entire compostables in the school. So they will run compostables and they do it. And if you move to California, in the University of Berkeley in California, the students can opt in for a compost facility which is run by the University of California. So they manage the entire waste management in Berkeley. So the students drive the heavy trucks, they go out and pick the compostables, and they have designed, when they do this, there is this technical team which works on some of the ideas. So they, like the concrete mix, they have come up with new composting facilities where like you dump your degradable waste into the container, and by the time you reach your compost management facility, the inoculum is already there and it is already mixed with inoculums, and then it is just fed into a digester, and within 12 days they get compost, and normally it takes about 45 days. So end of it, the university also pays back the money for all the students who the profit they made is divided back to them. So I can't, I mean, I'm sorry, I can't imagine that kind of a, so I mean, because in all these cases, you are doing business and learning business, and you are learning how to work with another person as a group. You are learning how to deal with the society. So those kind of exposures are very much lacking in our academic system.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I have a question. This is from a sustainability leader for the country.
Yeah.
Has there been a consideration for shadow environmental tax to waste and discard to landfill?
There were brilliant question. There were several ideas in terms of taxing, and one of the bit setback was we have this GST. So just before GST, there were several states where we have, many environmental organizations have lobbied, including Kerala. We have lobbied for getting few things like if you remember the former Minister for Finance, Dr. Isaac, in his first budget, he tried to tax burgers and other things which were using fatty, more
Fatty
which
acid.
has more fat in that, so that those can be used for subsidizing the treatment. So in that sense, it is a very good idea for thinking like environmental tax for, like if you put it the other way around, see, everyone in this session will complain about rise in price for LPG, liquid petroleum gas, which we use for cooking, and it is nothing but butane. And all of us love to use a carry bag and throw it into the dustbin. And 90% of our carry bags are made by polymerizing butane. So the more poly bags you use, in India, actually, I think nearly 5 to 6% of the national production of butane is going for polymerization to make carry bags. So we don't really connect our action to the others. So it is high time that we tax poly bags, so that there is a global study which says that roughly we use it for 12 minutes, and poly bags are actually designed for lasting 100 to 300 years. So it is actually a wrong science what we do, and a wrong technology. We don't use the right technology for the right thing. So yes, it makes a lot of sense, but unfortunately, so far we have not really succeeded. There is a bottle EPR, and there is a sachets. Like if you look at as a, I'm sure your team will really have this headache of dealing with sachets and small discards of plastics, which is come to your facility. May not what you create, but it is something which your guests or visitors will create. And there is a EPR bill which is there pending before the Parliament for more than 12 years now. So it is high time we do that, and that may move it a little bit more towards moving a greener kind of a thing. So if you looked at, we had a time when we had most of the styrofoams as a packaging material, and suddenly you saw a lot more paper and other stuff coming as packing, especially mobile phones and other stuff. That is because those brands which use paper has a global policy that they will get rid of styrofoam. So I think those kind of, and like for example, Sony is a brand which has decided to phase out PVC from all its produces, all the products which it is selling. So many corporates are now having those kind of corporate goals. And I think it is high time the government come up with a support by taxing an environmental task. And if something has to be wasted, then it need to be taxed. That will be the very simple thing. Like it should not be wasted.
Agree. Yes.
No, selling a cycle, I think there should not be any tax because it creates more environment contribution. And something else, like if you are selling a styrofoam, it need to be taxed because there is no way to solve it. Or a carry bag need to be taxed because there is no way to solve it. And it's how you build the green economies, and that is there in many places. And in fact, when Mr. Al Gore, who as a champion of film, he went to Denmark and he made a talk into the Denmark Parliament. And immediately after his speech, the Parliament came up with a new taxing. It said that any plastic, like milk and anything which can be packed in all the liquids, if it is packed in high intensive material like HDP or plastics, then it will be taxed €1. So they were looking for cartons and cardboard materials which can carry. Like if you look at the Amul Tasa, which is not a plastic carry bag, or it is not a plastic material. Of course, it is a smaller plastic lining, so it uses less plastic. So there were such ideas of taxing for things.
Right. So I don't see any more questions in the chat section. So I think we can. Okay. So there is one more question, sir. Sorry. So this question is from Vaishak. What do you believe is the major reason for increase in waste dumping? Is it the cost involved behind the recycling or composting, or is it the time saving attitude of people, or any other major reason? If it's sorted out, then we could suggest a solution for the problem.
Yeah, brilliant question. I think if you ask me, most of the stinking waste on the roadsides you see is coming from chicken stalls and stuff, mostly meat and fish places. And these are highly nutritious. Like you can run a small facility. In Kannur, there is a facility running where you can convert that into very valuables. Like there is a compost and all the like even in the feather and bones, there is a lot more valuables it can be produced. So one, the lack of legal actions. Like when you live in a community, you don't expect every individual to have the responsible behavior. You need to have a law which motivates the individual to behave in the collective community good way. So that is lacking in many sense. And the other thing is we don't really care actually. If you care, you don't really, we don't love our neighbors, we don't love our children. We have all this nice talking like I care for you, I love you, but we don't really care. We are very much individualistic, indulging in individual, very short time conveniences, and we don't really care for either a friend or my child or my planet. So that indifference is the core of causing this thing. And I think I'm like 20 rupees a barrel of managing compost or waste from a chicken yard or something is not a big amount, but they still do it. And even like I can see that in shops which on policy decided not to give plastic carry bags, the customers will come and create this huge ruckus around like I need a bag kind of thing. So we are unfortunately we have a lot more people who are totally ignorant and idiots. So you need to manage them, which is going to be a big challenge.
Yes. So,
sorry
yes.
for
so
that.
as a follow-up to that question, no problem, sir. As a follow-up to that question, do you have any message or do you have any words to give to the next generation or to the young generation?
So I have
who
a
still
word.
believe that this is not my problem, or I will not be here to face these consequences or things like that. So do you have anything to tell them?
I have a very old thing to say. Like when in 1967, one of my friend who is a student activist in University of Berkeley, Jack Weinberg, He was asked by a young student about what you said, and he said, "Don't trust people above 30." And fortunately, I will have the same things to say, because it is a time where you can't